Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another great session today, how to be successful with Oracle ERP Cloud by taking a risk-based approach to access. So given what we're currently seeing in the market, we've invited Rick Anthony, VP at Adeles, over to join us today, along with Adeles Khan, our CEO, to share invaluable insight and real-world stories from the field to help you be successful as well. Just a few housekeeping items before we do get started. So the session is being recorded for reference after the session. There will be a Q&A, so please feel free to send over any questions you have and put those in the control panel. And if we don't get to those, then we'll make sure that we do follow up with you in an email after the session. And we also do have some complimentary risk and control health checks for Oracle ERP. If you're interested, just feel free to get in touch with me after the session. So I'll ask our speakers to briefly introduce themselves, and then we'll dive down into the discussion, which is why you've all joined today. So, Rick?
Yes. Well, thank you first for inviting me to be part of this session. You know, I've known Elle for many years. We met when I was living in the UK and moved to the US about 3 years ago, and that friendship. So my background, gosh, it's now 25 years experience implementing Oracle applications now. I keep forgetting to change that year. I'm not counting anymore. But I've been implementing Oracle applications from the green screens, spent a good portion of my career in implementing e-business and some on the JD Edwards side. And then for the last 6-7 years, focusing strictly on implementing Oracle Cloud. And I know it's come a long way, Oracle Cloud, and I know it will continue to grow and develop as time goes on. And currently I am with Ellison, and I am a VP of Industries here, and I've been here since I really moved back, so about 3 years now.
Thanks, Rick. Adeles?
Yes, thanks, Rick, for joining, and Emma for running this. Appreciate everybody attending this event. I'm Adeles Khan. I'm the founder CEO here at SafePass. Our mission is to help customers reduce risk in their business, and the best way we think we can do that is by helping them control access risks in their ERP systems. So that's our laser focus. That's what my background is. So for the last 25 years, I've been in the finance and technology side, enterprise technology side, helping customers implement, like Rick, ERP systems like Oracle e-business suite and other platforms, and then helping them put good business controls around it so that they can get more value out of these products. I've also written a book with a colleague of mine from Oracle, Nigel King. It's called Governance, Risk, and Compliance Handbook. I've done quite a bit of traveling and presented various ebooks and white papers. So learning is a passion for me, and I'm here to share the stories we're seeing in the market and hopefully provide some tips and benefits that you can take to your organizations and benefit from that. So thank you again for attending.
Thanks, Adeles. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Emma, and I'm here on the marketing team at SafePass. So who is SafePass? Well, basically, we sit in the offices of some of the world's largest organizations, helping them with fine-grained access management solutions, which is what we're really focused on. So we have over 5.7 million ERP users on our platform. We've identified over 445 million unique risk incidents, making SafePass the single most utilized cloud platform for detecting and controlling risk in enterprise applications such as ERP systems. So the agenda we'll be following today. So we'll be talking a little bit about, the trends that we see in the market, what makes cloud projects successful, what makes them fail, which we hope it isn't the case, but can happen. Challenges, lessons learned. Obviously, Adele and Rick were, are industry veterans and can share many stories from the field and lessons learned. And then how can we help, with access, find those fine-grained, granular solutions, access management solutions that SafePass offers. So let's dig into the discussion. So, Rick, what are we seeing in the market?
It's interesting. Over the last few years, things have definitely changed, and the market for cloud applications has really accelerated. And if you listen to anything that Larry Ellison says in his reports, it's going to continue to grow. And he's estimating that it's going to grow from 5 billion to 20 billion in the marketplace over the next 5 years, and that's a considerable amount of growth. And he's been right most of the time, so we have to prepare for that. But what I've seen is a lot of the on-premise customers, and this is, if you looked at his last report and a video, he really is putting his money on taking on-premise customers. That's PeopleSoft, JD Edwards, e-business customers to cloud. And we're seeing it too. We've seen it with a number of customers, especially during this period. When you had the pandemic, we had customers that were on e-business that couldn't access their systems from home. Their VPN wouldn't allow them to access. We've had one of the largest travel retailers and manufacturers out there. They had just gone live with HCM, and they said, if it wasn't for Oracle HCM, we wouldn't be able to function. We'd have to shut our doors, and they were an on-premise customer. So we're seeing that the e-business customers, JD Edwards customers, are looking to move to cloud, and they need to do that. And there's been a few dates that are out there from Oracle where they needed to either upgrade or look at cloud. And what I've seen is those customers that have decided to move, they're looking for system integrators that can help them to move their current e-business to what it looks like in cloud and understand what that transition is going to be. So they need to know, how much is it going to cost? How much complications and complexity there will be to it. That's been an issue with a number of customers, and I talked to every business and JD Edwards customers and none of them had said it's going to be an easy move. Every one of them has said we've got so many customizations we can't move. So they're looking to understand how complex that is going to be able to move. And I've got stories to tell about customers where we've taken to cloud, where we've been able to, our accelerators, to show them how they can move to cloud and the complexity it is. And most of them have. I mean, when we work with them in doing this assessment, we do it for free, and 50% of those customers decide to move to cloud because we clear the smoke and we're able to let them know how they can move to cloud, what their values are going to gain by moving to cloud. So, and I'm not saying this to promote, obviously, e-business, is find a partner. If you're an on-premise customer, find a partner that can show you these values, show you why you should move to cloud, and not just that you've got a on-premise solution and you've got a upgrade that you have to adhere to. But we're also seeing a lot of customers that are non-Oracle customers that need to move to cloud. And the reason a lot of them are doing that is, Gartner will get out there in their Magic Quadrant and show how Oracle is best in class and best in breed in those particular areas, whether it's ERP, EPM, or HCM. So they're listening to that. But what they're also finding is it is an enterprise system that continues to grow with you. So you will find in a lot of these situations where they're non-Oracle, they have never, worked with Oracle as an application before. They've heard about it, they've had some experience through third parties on it, but when they actually see the system and the robustness of it, they really see how they can move forward. And there are a lot of systems out there, and you know, for instance, SAP is one of the few that offers that full scope of enterprise systems. So it'll cover supply chain, EPM, HCM, and ERP. But a company like SAP, they grew their portfolio through acquisition. So you've got different data structures in all of those. So if you needed to upgrade, I was talking to one customer that was on SAP, and they had it across the board for various workflow processes. They had to do 19 upgrades just to manage ERP, HCM, supply chain, because they all have different data structures. Whereas Oracle, you know, when they have acquired systems and built their own, it's still under that same data structure. So when you do upgrade, it's not going to be an upgrade that across multiple data streams. It's going to be an upgrade that is on a quarterly basis, that is continuous improvement included in there. So that's where we're seeing a lot of customers that aren't on Oracle move to Oracle when they're looking for that one true source of one source of truth, because they're not having to deal with Excel spreadsheets anymore. They're not having to deal with different data structures. So when you do that, you have to have a bit more complex analytic systems that go with that. The other thing I'm seeing a lot of is, you know, when as I said, I've been implementing Oracle applications for 25 years. And, you know, I always talk about one of my customers when I was in Europe. It was a 5-year project to implement e-business for Expedia, division of Expedia. And when the project was defined, they had their ROI. How are they going to get their return from their investment? What does good look like? So this was a 5-year project. So they really found it difficult to rationalize what the value was going to be over that 5-year period, but they still had to put it in there because they had to put the value realization to upper management, define value realization, and how that was going to be measured. But in actuality, about halfway through the project, they lost vision to their ROI, and the return on investment was just getting their lives back. You know, 5 years into it, you know, you got a 5-year project, 2.5 into it, they just want their lives back. You know, they just wanted, because people were doing their day job as well as implementing. So, you know, all that was thrown out the window. Well, we now have cloud, and cloud, you can go live in 6 months, 9 months, complex projects, 24 months, okay, for large global enterprises. So now customers are really looking for a measurable return on their investment. What is good going to look like? How do I quantify that? And I think more and more as this goes forward and people realize you can attain that, I think you're going to see that trend continue and grow. And Oracle has actually responded to that, because they have this new product called FAW, which is Fusion Analytics Warehouse, which is specifically for ERP, HCM, and supply chain. And it produces those analytics across those various areas, those pillars, so that you can have a lot of those analytics, and you can build in your own return on investment into those, into that application. So I think you're going to see an adoption of FAW quite a bit more. The other big trend is, and it's never really gone away, but it seems to be more focused, is the industry specificity. more and more companies, when they're looking at cloud and as SaaS products, you have to follow best practices. And you have to understand how those best practices work. And, you know, a company that is in professional services and a company that is industrial manufacturing, they may not have that same workflow processes. So they want to find applications that are specific to their industry and work for their industry. So we're finding that you know, it's a lot about change management and understanding that, you know, your on-premise solution that you were using previous is not going to be the same, but you're going to adopt best practices. And once you figure out what those best practices are, there may be a few business processes that are specific to your industry that you may have to write what is called an extension. An extension is a customizable business process that's put into a PaaS that allows the customer to have that industry specificity if it's needed. And you know what I tell customers, and I tell people on the line here today is, find, if you're going down that path and you do have specific industry specificities you need in the product, find an SI that knows how to, that understands your business, but also can write that extension for it. And it's not going to be the world of e-business where, you know, you write 2,400 extensions. You don't need to do that anymore. You know, I'm working with customers and, you know, there's maybe 15 or 20 that you have to write and maintain, but they're a lot easier to do than it was previous. So that's what I see as the trends there.
Thanks for that great insight there, Rick. What about you, Adele?
Yeah, I think Rick covered in detail, so all I can do is you know, echo that some of these trends. In the interest of time, we can move on to the next slide, but I will just echo, verify that, you know, where we see the customer from a controls perspective and risk management perspective, they're concerned about, you know, when they're talking about that ROI discussion, that resonates with me coming from a finance experience, is that they are asking those tough questions, and they're also, you know, there's the stakeholders in the organization that we talk to. So there's the, you know, the traditional IT stakeholders. They need to understand their role in the cloud and what controls they need to own in the cloud. So even though you're putting everything in the cloud from an IT general controls perspective, you know, as Rick said, your change management controls around those patching. And we work with Evosys, so we have some common customers together where change management, you know, you may have Evosys performing your change management on certain things as part of their managed service offering. And then there's controls around it that SafePass can provide, right? There's obviously, you know, just the security design itself in cloud with all the cyber threats, with this war going on right now. We're, you know, we're hearing, you know, that we should be protecting our businesses better against cyber threats and so forth. So, you know, those are some of the concerns that come up during the selection process from our customers, and where we can assist our partners like Evosys and other customers is just basically make sure the things are tied down. So when the decision to go to cloud is presented to management, it not only includes this great transformation of your business to, you know, essentially to get prepared for the modern way of doing business, which is what Rick's covered really well, but also from a controls perspective, you don't lose any controls, because, you know, that's what CFOs lose their sleep over. So we cover that side of it, and that's what we specialize in. So yeah, that's basically my controls perspective on how customers are selecting. We have a number of customers that are on EBS, moved to cloud, and then they had some challenges with the cloud, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And they reverted back to EBS while those controls and challenges were addressed. So obviously you can learn from experts like Rick today and not have those challenges, and I'll let him talk more about that. But that's where we can help. You know, if you are running into challenges like designing your security and roles, making sure your IT and your IT controllers and audit and finance people are comfortable with the statements that are coming out of your cloud application, to make sure there are controls across change management, like configuration changes, master data changes, as well as access and security is designed correctly. That's where we're assisting cloud customers with partnership with folks like Rick. So Rick, if you want to take this to the next level.
Yeah, and just a comment on that, on the deal is, you know, we find customers want to look at risk and controls after, and we try to push them in the beginning. Start that when you're building a global design, when you're building design to it, have those considerations in place. And I know sometimes, you know, this obviously impacts the commercials, but it has to be looked at. It really should be, because that is best practices. Because after the fact, you know, like you said, Adele, you bought into it and you realize there are certain limitations on the control, and maybe you have to revert back. And that's not the right way to do things.
Exactly.
So I really do push our customers to look at that risk and controls in the very beginning. So on the subject of, you know, what makes transformation successful. So, you know, I used to give global talks on how implementations fail and why. And I gave those talks, and it wasn't to disparage Oracle or the application. It is really to focus on best practices, how you make them successful. And I've listed a few here on why, you know, transformations should be made, but how you make them successful. So the first I always look at is the business case, building the business case, because what's going to transpire is you're going to be trying to fix something that isn't broken. So you've got a e-business system, you've got a JD Edwards, you've got a nav system. Sometimes they are broken, they need to be fixed because growth. But oftentimes the user experience, they don't see that. So you need to build a business case of why do you really need to do it? And you know, when I engage with my customers, I try and talk them out of an implementation so that they can understand, you know, what it is really going to happen during this whole process. And what I find in doing so, they then justify internally why they need to build, why they need to change. So building that business case, is it functionality you're going to get? Is it a faster close process? Is it better alignment to the industry? How do you track your inventory? All those areas are building that business case so that you've got that one source of the truth. So I always work with customers and try to develop it. And that's where, you know, I come back to that ROI discussion. And you'll hear me say that again a couple times during this, because, you know, that's where you start building the ROI. Why should you do this? Because when you look at some customers, they just may want parity from their e-business to cloud. When they shouldn't look at it that way, they should look at what additional functionality are they going to get. Now, you know, one of the things that we do, when we look at those customers, we have a process in which we currently look at their current state, measure it against what the future state's going to be, and then show the added functionality and business processes they're going to gain by moving to cloud. So we help customers to build that business case, and we go through that process and then identify KPIs that will allow them to measure that success. So, you know, that's where I go to the second point is, you know, how are you going to measure these successes? Okay, so you want your manufacturing company, and you want to be able to make sure your POs, your purchase orders, and your procurement is following adherence to guidelines. I mean, I was talking to in Canada a company that was a $3 billion company that did all their procurement through PDFs, filling out a PDF form and turning that in. And, you know, in looking at moving to cloud, they were, by consolidation on a global basis, that alone paid for it. that alone paid for the savings they would earn from just having a integrated procurement process. I mean, that's a simple example. You know, how your industry and what sort of things that you need to do that your current application, you need best of breed practices. So I've done this, and I'll talk about it a little bit more, is research it. Don't just look at what I said parity before, but look at all those other best of breed applications you have and you're currently using, and look at what your new software is going to be. I mean, I had one company, and I keep talking through this because I do have a lot of experience in this areas. They were spending $2 million a year in software licenses across the board. That included Microsoft, that included best of breed, various licenses across the board, and including HCM and supply chain. And when they moved to Oracle Cloud, they were able to consolidate all those applications into one enterprise system, and the actual annual spend for them for those same applications was $350,000. Okay, so that's significant savings for them. So, you know, just don't, when you're looking at this and you really want to make it successful, don't look at parity. Look at what you have as a whole and consolidate those applications. And I'm doing that more and more with our customers now, because they, you know, I ask for an architectural diagram and I start picking things out that Oracle can do they didn't think about or they didn't know. And all of a sudden, you know, we're building that business case again. Okay. Another key area is buy-in from the top. I can say hand over heart, one of the top 5 reasons why implementations fail. And you know, I give these talks, but EVSys over the last 3 years has been brought into over 60 rescue projects. 60 rescue projects. And in more than half, reasons why they initially failed were executive buy-in. They thought this was just an IT implementation. It was just IT, and you know, we had to level set when we engaged on those customers to say, with the CFO, the COO, and the CEO, is it starts at the top. You need to buy into this whole process, otherwise it won't be successful. Because again, your people that are actually going to be doing the hands-on work on their side, your resources, have a day job. So you're going to be asking them to work not just 8 hours a day anymore. You're asking them to work in certain periods during the implementation 12 hours a day or more. So if they see leadership is bought in and that they're listening, then you're going to get that buy-in as well that feeds into the rank and file. But also the buy-in has to be on those measurement of successes from the executive team as well, because every implementation is going to have a rough patch or two. Okay, but if you have a ROI and a KPI that you know that's going to improve your business, you know, instead of throwing in the towel, you continue on. And as long as they have that focus and know that they're in good hands, and you know, I tell customers in the very beginning, in the kickoff, is we will have a few bumps in the road, guarantee that, but we stay course. And you know, I've just had a recent go live where in the beginning it was bumpy. At the end, they're now a happy, referenceable customer for Oracle and EVSys. Okay. Recognizing key requirements. Again, going back to those KPIs, what's going to be important to you? Understanding, can the product achieve those key requirements, whether it be industry or whether it be just best practices? And understanding what the limitations are, because you know, the way you did things in the past are going to be different from any new system you go to, unless you rewrite it yourself. And nobody's going to do that because it's too expensive and too costly to maintain. So understanding those key requirements and understanding change management, and I know Adil will talk a bit more about that change management, but understanding change management in achieving those key requirements. And the last point is go live, post go live, sorry, is when you've purchased a SaaS system, and especially Oracle, you've purchased a product that continues to develop and innovate. So what you knew of your product 2 years ago for supply chain or 3 years ago is not the same product today. On an on-premise, you would get your upgrades and enhancements every 5 years, every 6 years, okay? And it was significant effort of work to upgrade and get those enhancements. With Oracle, it develops and it's kicked out every quarter, these new enhancements. So having a system where you feel it's successful in the go live, that's just the halfway point of having a system that you're going to grow with, because there are going to be enhancements that come out. And that's why our managed services is called application enhancement services, because we help you through that whole process post go live. So all these new enhancements that are coming out, because with Oracle, you can hold back on a couple of these enhancements on these quarterly releases for 2 periods. That's 2 quarters. But then they push it out, they force it out. So you need to have a plan for post go live and that managed service. Otherwise, one, you're not going to take advantage of the cloud that you bought and the additional functionality that they're pushing out during these quarterly releases. But you're going to have screens change on you, and the users are not going to be understanding what those changes to those screens are. I mean, that's where you can have the choice and say, you know what, we don't accept that, and you change the configuration. But it's that forward thinking on post go live. So those are my points for a cloud transformation, how to make it successful. I don't know, Adil, if you have any additional input.
No, that's a very valuable experience for obviously being in the trenches and doing this for many customers. It's impressive to hear, there's 60 plus companies that you've even done rescue projects, not to mention the number you've done across the board, across the globe on other areas. So from a SafePass perspective, where we are getting a big, we get, usually we call it a platform burning call, right? Somebody is in UAT and their auditors have failed their controls in cloud implementation, and now they're burning, some amount of money depending who they're using. So now they're, basically clock's running and they have to get these controls right. So that's unfortunate, because when those calls come in, we certainly roll up the sleeves and help the customers. But when partners like Rick are involved and they're proactive, and as Rick said, they already designed this controls track into their workshops, the world is a much better place. And that's what success looks like to us when we work with partners and customers that really think about controls. And frankly, the top management, does want controls in place, because their top management job depends on signing financial statements. So clearly their buy-in is not our challenge from a controls perspective. In fact, it helps the IT projects become more successful if you talk about controls with senior management, because that's one of the key reasons why, the key drivers for them to select a new platform. I'll give you just a few examples of what makes that successful. So when we do start project on the right foot with a partner like Evosys, what we find is that during those workshops that are being discussed to make the business more agile, more successful in this cloud world, the transformation discussions that are happening during work streams. In fact, those discussions are also creating the knowledge for us to build out the controls. For example, Rick mentioned the purchase order example, which is an area very close to me, because we see our customers, one of our customers in Chicago has 70 some procure to pay controls, right? Which is a ton of controls. You think about it, because most companies, our surveys and market industry surveys have shown have total of 200 controls for the enterprise, even very complex enterprises. This organization has, over 120 business units around the world. And anyways, they have 70 some controls in place. So any kind of change to that environment would need to make sure that those controls are actively working when they move the procure to pay cycle. So think about a cloud implementation of your procure to pay cycle, right? You're implementing, your management expects the same controls to be in place. So let's pick a few examples. You have a control that says that you don't pay duplicate invoices, very obvious. You want to make sure that the people that approve the purchase orders have the right authority in the system, they have the right custom roles assigned to them, and they cannot, for example, create their own invoices and pay those invoices. We call that segregation of duties. There are restrictions around access. If you're working in certain markets, or you do business in certain markets, maybe there's a data provision that applies to you under a regulatory guideline like CCPA, GDPR in Europe, and it's really becoming, data protection is becoming really a good way of doing business. So least amount of data need to know. So your master data like customer credit, employee national IDs, your supplier's bank accounts, if they require additional data security, as you know, cloud offers that capability, but being able to design that up front saves you a significant amount of time and not have to do that burning platform called the SafePass at the 11th hour when your management is spending through a lot of money trying to go live, and now you missed your go live date. So to avoid those risks, we recommend that as you're going through these work streams, and the customers that are successful with cloud from an audit perspective, and ultimately from a control streamlining perspective, because remember, controls are good business. Controls is basically reducing the risk that can keep you from achieving your objectives, right? So when you think about ROI, controls are the key part of that ROI, because they are the evidence that you will achieve those ROI, right? It's pretty simple for me to say that, but sometimes it gets muddled up in the IT discussions, right? So the reason controls are so important is because if you've put together an ROI platform and you're saying that, this is our procure to pay process, and we want to achieve this, as Rick mentioned, a significant amount of saving in our procure to pay process by streamlining that process, going from those PDF purchase orders to a workflow enabled online digital system, which is modern. We will save a ton of money, but during that process, you also want to make sure that three-way match control still works, whether it's on paper and PDF or in the system. The reason you need that control is because if that control fails, you are bleeding money to the bottom line. You're wasting companies' resources. Your financial forecast will be off, and will you report to the market incorrect numbers? That would result in a impact on your stock price, let's say, or maybe even a head will roll at the top because you missed your estimates. So it can be very painful for companies to deal with control failures, and controls have to be embedded in the beginning, and it's really easy and it's low cost because you're already producing the information that a controls partner like ourselves will need to then embed those controls, like the three-way match, like the control around data access, around segregation of duty policies, around fraud risks, whatever those risks you have today. Your auditors are testing those, right? But if they're not part of that conversation and they show up 24 months late, and then they say, well, where are my controls? Because I can't run this business and I can't report financial results to the market, that's when the challenges start to come up. And it gets very costly because now you're doing things manually to control everything, and you're providing evidence of what controls are effective, and auditors call that substantive testing. And that's usually a 20x cost in audit increase, right? 20-fold increase in cost, because now they have to bring an army of auditors to basically they don't trust your system, so they have to take every transaction and record it into a spreadsheet and compare and reconcile that with the financial statement. And if you want to avoid that, the best thing is to get those controls in. If there's any lesson I can leave you with, is to include your control design as part of your design workshops, and analyze your current controls and make sure you can reconcile them with future controls. That's the best way to get a success in your cloud transformation. And that's how the ROI will be attained, because your controls will drive to that ROI.
Fantastic insight there. So we've touched on the challenges a little bit. Do you want to dive into them in a bit more detail, Rick?
Yeah, I think, I've talked through some of these. I talked about a IT-driven project versus a business, a business transformation. And we talked about that, and that's where I've seen a number of challenges. I had to go live with a well-named skin treatment company where it was an IT-driven project, and upon go live, the business had considerable issues because there was a lot of considerations that weren't made. It's all fixable, it's all being done, but it would have been a lot easier transition moving them from one system to the next if the business was included through the whole process. So I always, because this is ERP and HCM and supply chain, you definitely need the business involved in all those. Doesn't matter if it's a small project or a big project. Understanding the impact of the business. Again, you have to understand this is going to be a disruption to the business. You've got to continue to hit your quarterly goals as a business and your sales and continue to drive forward. So understanding that, one is this isn't going to be evasive through the whole process. There's going to be demands on the teams, but they have to make themselves available during those critical areas like design phase, like the testing. Those are areas where we need the user engagement and the business leaders involved. So they need to understand during that implementation there's going to be a requirement. And what happens if you don't do that is the project gets lengthened. Your go live starts to stretch because we can't get sign-offs on design and such. So, and that has a commercial impact. That obviously has a commercial impact. So while it's a challenge, it doesn't mean it's gonna fail, but it is a challenge, and people need to be aware of that. We talked a little bit about parity. We talked about where that parity needs to be, and it's not just the parity from your current system. It's looking at your complete design, your application footprint, and seeing where you can actually gain some benefit by having one enterprise. One thing I really didn't talk about is global design. When we take on a customer that is a global customer, we handle it very differently. We have a global design phase, which is really important to understand all the localizations. I can tell you stories of a multi-billion-dollar company that was based out of Europe, and they rolled out to the US, and they didn't have an understanding of the localizations. And we were brought in to fix that because they didn't have a good understanding of all those localizations globally and how their business processes are done in those specific countries. So it's really it's really important that you have that global design phase and make sure that your SI is aware of that. I talked about the enhancements that we have on a quarterly basis that are happening out there, and you have to be able to commit to those enhancements and talk through what is today, and then how you're going to manage the business in the future with these additional enhancements. And obviously these enhancements, they come out, Oracle gives you a preview of those enhancements at least a couple of quarters in advance so that you can have that understanding and you can take advantage of it. But I always say, make sure you have a partner where it's not just strictly support, where you just have a bundle of hours that you pull down. Those are the old days of on-premise. You really need to have a partner like Evasys that understands that these quarterly releases, they may break some of these integrations or some of these extensions, and you'd be able to work on that, as well as all these other enhancements and features you'll be receiving.
Absolutely. Fantastic insight again there, Rick, for our audience today. So, and in the interest of time, I'm going to skip over the next slide because we've talked a little bit about, we've shared stories and insight from the field, and touch on some of the solutions, access management solutions that SafePass offers Oracle ERP customers. And then if we have time, we do have a few questions, so we'll touch on those as well. So Adil?
Yeah, thank you, Emma. So Rick, that was good insight into some of the areas where people can watch out as they think about moving forward with such a big undertaking to get it right. From a controls perspective, one of the first questions that comes up is how we design our roles so that they comply with our existing policies or maybe revised and new policies. So when you think about, I'll get a little tactical now, so we've covered all the big picture stuff. So when you think about your roles that you need to run your business, there are 2 or 3 approaches we're seeing from our customers. One is to, we're going to throw away everything we've done. We're going to start from scratch. We're going to do new workshops and really think about job roles in this new world, right? The world has changed in the last 2 years, and supply chain has changed, and we're going to find a new way. So those customers are typically designing roles in conjunction with workshops with their partners and their functional users and partners like us to, let's say, what does a finance user need? They need the ability to post journal entries, do inquiry on payments that have come from a subledger, accounts payable. They want to be able to look at fixed assets to see how the depreciation would work. So let's say that's a role, okay? And then they want to be able to do that in Germany or France or US. So that's the the data segmentation within that group. So those are the kind of questions we get. And what SafePass provides you is the ability to design that role within SafePass. So we call it Enterprise Roles Manager. If you need to learn more about it, please check out our website. And I'm sure there's some literature, or reach out to Emma and she can tell you more. But that's kind of a very basic question that comes up, and it's incredible how much time customers are spending doing this all manually. So you can do it all manually. The challenge with doing it is that, number one, it's not easily replicated. So as you have your SDLC process where you go from a lower instance to a higher instance into UAT, you want to ensure that all those privileges that make up the role, all those data security groups, all those duty roles, for example, they all transform and you don't miss a single privilege or a permission. Because if that happens, then basically, again, you've lost all that investment you've made, and it's a very manual process. So SafePass came to the market with role design capabilities where you can simulate that, you can extract that, and even for some customer, you can upload that depending on your version of cloud you're on, and so forth. So that's a big advantage. It's also an accelerator for our partners like Evasys, where instead of spending, let's say, after that 1-year project, if you're spending 2 months on just role design, that's a significant chunk of the project time, right? So you want to be able to move at the faster pace that cloud dictates, and so being able to do that in 2 weeks, or in some cases less than that, to an automated solution. So that's one category of customers that are starting. The other category of customers that we're seeing is customers that are basically lifting and shifting. Even though cloud is transformation, they're saying we already have these responsibilities in Oracle e-business suite, for example, already blessed. And you guys are already testing that for us through SafePass. We just want to take this GL manager responsibility and turn that into a GL manager role. Obviously, it's apples to oranges because security models are different, but in fact, the permissions or privileges are similar to functions or menus in e-business suite, right? So we also can provide some assistance to our customers through a network of our partners and our own service team, where we can help you do that roles lift and shift from responsibilities to role. It is somewhat manual, but because we have these tools and you can take the responsibility information from an ERP system like e-business suite and match that to the closely with using our roles manager for EBS, then point it to roles manager for cloud ERP and do that comparison. You'll still have to go through some variance analysis. I'm not saying it's point and click, but it's a significant saving again. But the benefits are now that your roles are in the cloud and the permissions match up with the functions and capabilities or activities, as we call it in SafePass, your activities haven't changed. So if you could perform the ability to post a journal entry and only view an invoice because that was a segregation issue, now you still have that same activity. So because we have that concept of activities, some people call it entitlement in the IDM world or ID governance world. So entitlement or activity remains the same. It's just that the composite of that activity is now based on privileges, permissions, duties versus functions, menus, and profile options, let's say. So that's how we can help you solution this, one of the biggest #1 challenge. And like I said, these slides will tell you a little bit. They're hard to read because they're just for the presentation. We'll share these. But if you're interested, please reach out to Emma. Next.
Yep, well, we do have some questions that have come in, unless you want to add anything else there, Adil.
Yeah, let me just add, I thought there was one more slide I had included, but I know we're going 100 miles an hour. So there's another piece to it. So once you've got the solution design done, the one thing that I can't see on this slide, but Emma, maybe I give that to you to add, is around the configurations. Because one of the things that Rick said that's very valuable is that, they've got a service that not only helps you go live and be successful, but because of the enhancements and other things that are coming in, you want to make that sustainable, right? You want to remain current with the latest trends and innovation that makes your business more productive and agile. So to do that, you need to have configurations that are possibly changed from time to time, quarter to quarter. So you have this additional controls that are emerging that are becoming really important for our customers, that on a quarterly basis, they, as part of their financial close, they also look at the configurations that are really the controls inside the process. So I mentioned three-way match as the most obvious example. It's the credit limits for customers. It's the vendor setup process. Suppliers, third parties in general are under big scrutiny right now with supply chain issues. So those types of controls is what your management is relying on to make sure that the financial statements that ultimately come out of the cloud and the reports that your chief operating officer needs to operate the business are all accurate, timely, a single source of truth, to use a term that Rick used earlier, right? So for those cases, you also want to be able to monitor the changes within the process, whether it's the configuration, whether it's master data or transaction. So the flip side of this is not only do you have good design in your controls, which we talked about as an example, your role design, but also that that design is operating effectively in terms of your processes. So there are no duplicate payments being made. We're preventing those. Configuration and approval hierarchies aren't being changed. A three-way match control is sacred and safe. AP terms are accurate and timely. Your supplier bank accounts are correct and not changed by people that shouldn't change them. They don't look like your employee bank accounts. For example, those are some examples of controls that I call process controls. So there's the access controls and there's the process controls. Those process controls can also be embedded into your cloud and most likely are, but the monitoring of that controls become a burden on the customer. So obviously if you're doing that by a bunch of people watching that screenshots and reviewing that manually, it can become very costly. So what we offer is the same solution we've had for many years for our on-premise customers, basically monitoring those configuration and transaction, and basically everything that impacts that process, the output of a process, right? So monitor all that so you can sleep better at night. Your CFO can sign off the financial statements without any risk because they know that the controls haven't shifted, the configuration haven't changed. Wrong people don't have access to too much information to do the wrong things in the system. And that's the continuous monitoring aspect of SafePass that our customers are adopting very quickly in the cloud because of the nature of, the reason they're transforming their business and making that sustainable, right? So that's the second side of that story.
Okay, well, thanks for, want to add anything, Rick, before
No,
we move on to the Q&A?
Absolutely great points. And, I think, again, customers really need to look at that in the beginning during that design phase, because sometimes it hits when the auditors, as Adil said, when the auditors are in halfway through, and then there's panic. And then things become more costly because the project is paused while they look for the solution. So absolutely needs to be as part of that whole design phase.
Yeah. Okay, well, we do have some great questions come in, so we'll just go through these quickly. We do have a couple of minutes left. So Rajesh wants to know, how do you deal with customers who, from a finance process perspective, would like to move to the cloud, but from an IT perspective, have customized their legacy and ERP applications so much that they have an unhealthy dependency on developers, contractors, and Oracle support, which is not only time consuming, but very costly?
Yes, and I've dealt with that. I've got a case study I have with it was just that IT, the global head of applications said, we've got way too many applications. I've got a team of 50. We can't do it. But the CIO said, you know what? There's too much dependency. Should that person that's running that director running that stuff off the curb one day, and God forbid a bus hits him, there was no documentation, there was no allotment of information. So he understood the risk involved, and we're talking about risk today. So I think what you have to do with the finance department is bring in Evisys. We do it for free. We'll have that assessment. We'll understand what their systems currently are. It's non-invasive. We'll show them what it'll look like in cloud, how long it will take, the complexity of it, but also a ballpark figure on cost.
Yeah.
So we can do this, and it's real easy to do. And this is oftentimes, you're dealing with people that are giving up their fiefdom, and they don't want to do that. So that's why actually businesses are the people that oftentimes drive it.
Great point.
That answers your question there, Rajesh.
You're making into your customers and why your customers are so successful, because I know for a fact that other companies that do cloud don't offer that free. So I think that certainly shows your commitment to the customer. That's admirable. Any other questions?
Okay. Yep. Anshuman wants to know, does SafePass provide risk governance and SOX audit, and how does it work?
So SafePass is an audit platform. In fact, when number of customers that have implemented SafePass refer to it as their audit platform, which is music to our ears. So yes, it absolutely has its audit standards. All the major audit firms, including the Big Four, use SafePass to perform audits as part of their engagement with the customer, or even in some cases directly with SafePass to perform audits. So it's built around the audit principles. That's where our founders, including myself, we come from that background. So yeah, it is an audit system. Basically, I'll just give you an example. So we talked about roles quite a bit, and that's one of the first things that we see as a symptom of the bigger audit issue. So role design, we talked about that. So one of the things the auditors will ask you for is a segregation of duty report on all your roles, even before the assignments are made, right? So you'll be able to pull out a report in SafePass that shows you all the customizations you've done to the roles, privileges, even inherited privileges, right? That's something we're uniquely qualified to do, that I understand that not everybody can offer you that. So an inherited role may have privileges that are inherited that basically expose the process to the user to more process capabilities than the policy dictates. So you'll be able to see all those policies and report them, and hopefully remediate them within SafePass using that simulation capability. And auditors will simply look for the evidence of that, as opposed to auditing everything from themselves, which can run into weeks, if not months, and tens of thousands of dollars of time just on that one specific audit. So that's a pop-up report. I have a customer in Chicago working with right now. That's exactly what the external auditors have asked, and they were able to get that report within a week. We set up 50 some rules in there, policies for audit, for SOD policies, sensitive access policies. We connected to the Cloud ERP, which we have APIs for. Oracle provides those. We extract the snapshot, we run the analysis and review the results with them. All of that integration, analysis, output is all done through basically a hyper-automated application platform we have built for audit. So yeah, we can easily do that in a very quick way. And when we get to rescue projects, that's what we do to understand what's happening.
Okay, do we have time for one last one, and we'll answer the others via email?
Sounds good.
Okay, so David says, one of our key challenges is around managing research finance, which is not currently part of Oracle Cloud. And also we have a very highly customized on-prem EBS system. So how best do you manage the move away from customizations and get the business to align with more standard processes?
So just on that, again, you might go to evasysglobal.com and look up Glide program. We actually, going back to that same process, I'll go in a little depth with another customer. Another customer had 50, well, I'm sorry about that, it's 2,100 customizations. And again, the person that managed that application said, there you go, we can't move to cloud. And we did an examination and said, okay, of your 2,100 customizations, you haven't used over half in the last 5 years. So now we're down to about 1,100. And then we did a further examination through that assessment process and said, okay, what we realized is you use best practices in about 70% of these customizations. So that is now inherent in Oracle Cloud product. So now we're down to about 300 customizations. And then we worked with change management. And then we saw that, okay, these additional 120 or so, actually a little more than that, came out. And now there's only 80 customizations now. Out of that 2,100, there's 80 customizations that have to be developed for them. And then a bulk of those were for one specific business process that we developed an extension for that addressed more than 50% of those customizations. So now we really were down to a very manageable chunk of customizations. So that's addressing how that happens, and we go through that process with you. Now, your point about research is very valid. Now, we've done this with a number of other companies that had certain processes that an application addressed that Oracle didn't have. I'll give a perfect example. I've got two, actually. One for subcontractor management within the construction industry. Oracle does not do that. We wrote a application, basically an extension to address just that. eBusiness has a property management module. Cloud does not. We actually wrote the mirror of that in a extension application in Oracle PaaS, and it's been deployed at about 15, 20 customers. So if your application, the research application, is not too complex, let's take a look at it. Let's see what it is. But we take those challenges on, and because we're an Oracle only company, we've got probably some of the best developers out there in developing these extensions and business processes. So again, reach out to me through LinkedIn, or we'll provide my email address and I can address that for you as well.
Okay, well, we are 7 minutes over time, but we do have many more questions. So we'll leave those to follow up in email. after the session. So I just want to say a huge thank you to we've been talking about risk, to Rick for joining us today, and Adele as always. So yeah, if you have any questions, any concerns, queries, we are here to help you. So just reach out to Rick, Adele, or myself, and we'll be happy to help you. So a huge thank you to everybody for joining us today. And we hope to see you next time when we'll be talking about preventive controls. So we hope to see you again next month. Thanks, Rick.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Adele. Thanks, everyone. Bye. Have a great day.